2024 is almost over, just a couple more days left. And before the year ends, I kind of just wanted to talk about how it's been a really interesting year for Nintendo. So, because we now know for sure that the Nintendo Switch 2, or whatever it ends up being called, is going to be announced before the end of March 2025. Still hoping for January, but that's neither here nor there. And the thing is, usually with a Nintendo platform, when a new console is coming out, it's very common for it to feel like Nintendo really flounders in that last year before the next console comes out. But with the Switch, it really hasn't felt that way as much. And I feel like Nintendo has really perfected, or almost perfected, the way it transitions from one console to the next, which is extremely important because, Nintendo has never really managed to capitalize on the success of one platform and carrying it over to the next, not really in the same way at least. So, especially, I think the biggest example is the Wii to the Wii U. Like, during 2011 and most of 2012 too, like, there just wasn't nothing happening with the Wii for the most part. So like, there's really not, it wasn't easy for people to be excited for the Wii U when the current Nintendo platform was so poorly regarded at this point. And the Switch really hasn't suffered from that. There's a couple factors for this, and obviously I think the biggest one is sales. With the Wii, by the time we got to 2011, people were really tired of the Wii. It was very weak compared to the competition. Motion controls were something that didn't really stick with people. It was really successful in those first few years, but once that fad kind of phased out, people were just kind of done with the Wii, and people wanted to play games. They kind of just probably bought the PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360, or maybe if they were more casual, they were just using their phones because they were kind of just also on the rise during this time. But also, it feels like a lot of the time Nintendo just doesn't give people enough reason to care about their platforms in the last year of its life. And with the Switch, things are really different. So in 2024, we're now at the end of December, Nintendo has released 12 games. That means, on average, every month in 2024, there was a game published by Nintendo on the Switch. And that's a pretty big deal when you think about it. So I was looking at this just to make sure I didn't see anything too stupid. And to be fair, one game every month on the last year of a system isn't like absurdly better than previous systems, but it is still better. So I looked it up, like looking at the year before the next platform releases, so not including that actual year, because they're also not counting 2025 for the Switch. So if you're counting 2024 for the Switch, we'll count 2000 for the Nintendo 64, 2005 for the GameCube, and so on. So with that in mind, Nintendo 64 in 2005 had 11 games published by Nintendo. One of them was only released in Japan, Custom Robo V2. So 11, 10, let's say. That's pretty close, not too bad. But then the GameCube had 9, and again, one of those was Japan exclusive, Donkey Kong 3. So 8, let's say. Wii had also 8 overall, and then Xenoblade came on 2012 in North America, but that's kind of like a little confusing. DS had 7 games before the 3DS came out. The 3DS in 2016, sorry. It had 12 games published by Nintendo, but 4 of those were eShop exclusive. So if you count retail games, which is what we're doing for the Switch for the most part, that would only be 8. So overall, the Switch has had more published games at retail compared to pretty much every Nintendo console before. And, but it's not just the amount, it's also the relevance of those titles. And I know a lot of the releases that Nintendo has had in 2024 may feel minor, but the thing is, a lot of them do serve a very specific purpose, which didn't always feel like it was the case with what was happening on a lot of previous platforms. So, 2024, let's go back to January. Nintendo released another Code Red collection this month. And yeah, obviously not a game a lot of people care about. Like it's not a super popular mainstream game. But Another Code was a series of games on the DS and Wii. Yeah, two titles. And yeah, it wasn't hugely popular, but the people that like them were really passionate about them. And I've seen a lot of videos on YouTube about them. And people really wanted these games to sort of come back, especially because the original developer of the series shut down. So to bring those games back in 2024, and with actually a lot of work done, because these were one game for the DS and one for the Wii. They were very different games conceptual, like in the way that they were played. But they brought them together into one package on the Switch, and they made them a lot more similar. And there was a lot of work put into it, and it looks really good. Like I didn't play them to be clear, but they look really good. And it is something that people in the Nintendo sphere were passionate about. And so even if it's not for everyone, it really does keep a bit of that excitement alive with the Switch, right? Like people were excited for this because it's something that they never thought they'd see return. Then February, we had Mario vs. Donkey Kong, which for one thing is a series that also has been dormant for like what, 8 years at this point, 7 years. So that's a big factor on why they're like bringing back that series, but also the fact that they're bringing it back to a state that most people prefer. Because the thing is, the Mario vs. Donkey Kong series, if you watch like video essays online, everyone pretty much agrees that after Mario vs. Donkey Kong, all of the games, and there were a lot of them, all of them became very samey and in many ways not even as fun. Like they were functional, but the puzzles weren't as good in subsequent games as they were in Mario vs. Donkey Kong or its predecessor, Donkey Kong on the Game Boy or Donkey Kong 94. So they're bringing it back to this original game, the Game Boy Advance game. They remade it with an art style that I would say is really pretty. Like it came out in this era, this little period where Nintendo was finally taking a bit more liberty with Mario from a visual perspective on what they could do with the franchise. So it looks very clean, but it's also still very visually appealing. And it's simple, but it looks really good. And they took this Game Boy Advance game and made it look really modern. Apparently there's actually new stages in there, it's not just a remake. So, it's a pretty big deal in that sense. And Nintendo actually priced it a little bit cheaper than other Switch retail games, which is very uncommon for them. So that's pretty nice. It's not a major release again, but pretty cool. Then March, we had Princess Peach Showtime, which is the first game where Princess Peach takes the lead in like almost 2 decades. There was Super Princess Peach on the DS. I forgot when that came out. But people also had a lot of problems with that game. Just the mechanics themselves and the concept was not something people were very fond of. So this is the first time that Peach gets to star in a game that's quality. So it's not for everyone. If you saw reviews, it's very child oriented, but it's quality. It looks nice too. Like the visuals on that game are very, very nice. So and it's just it's a new thing. It's a new thing for Nintendo to take Peach and give her a starring role, which is important because a lot of Nintendo franchises have male leads, and Mario specifically has a lot of damsel in distress type games. So to give the woman in that series like a starring role and make her the hero, I think that was pretty important. And again, the game just looks great. I think the variety in costumes is really fun. Hopefully they can flesh out that concept. But yeah, like it's another interesting entry that has its place in Nintendo's lineup. Like it makes sense. It capitalizes on the movie from last year. It gives the woman a starring role, makes her the hero, and it potentially appeals to younger children and younger girls, which may not always feel very welcome in the gaming sphere. So that's also that's cool. And then we jump to Endless Ocean Luminous. This is one of those more of a stinkers. It released in early May. Again, it is bringing back a series that people kind of miss. It was on the Wii. It has been many, many years since any Endless Ocean game was released, but I think a lot of people would agree that the execution wasn't great. But you know, it was fine. And again, bringing back a beloved franchise is always, you know, nice to see. I think people would say that more investment would have been nice, but it's still great to see. Like it's capitalizing on something that Nintendo knows people wanted, even if they didn't deliver in the best way they could have. It's answering someone's request, so it makes sense too. Then we have like the first big one, which was Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. If you follow like Paper Mario, the Paper Mario story, like the timeline, especially since Paper Mario Sticker Star and the 3DS, like it has been a very controversial series. The 3DS one was terrible. The Wii U one was also divisive. And Origami King on the Switch is actually pretty good. I would say I really like that one. But whenever you see discourse about Paper Mario these days, it's always like Thousand Year Door was the best one. Like we should go back to that formula. And we always just kept saying like Nintendo won't listen. They're just doing whatever they want, not realizing that people just want Thousand Year Door style to come back. So it did. Like in its entirety, the Thousand Year Door is here. It looks fantastic. Like the visuals on that game are really pretty. It is 30 frames per second now instead of 60, but I don't know. I don't really care about that. It's a great remake of a game that people have been begging to see for years. So like again, sure, it's a remake, but it's something that people really wanted. People were extremely excited to see it. So I think that again, huge release for something, you know, in the last year of the system's life. This really just continues that excitement for the system, and that's hugely important if Nintendo wants to be successful moving into the next system. Then we move on to June. We had Nintendo World Championships NES Edition. I think, again, it's a concept that's interesting. This is a lower tier title in terms of price. It was only 30 bucks. I think it was digital only in both America and Europe. So, you know, it's a little bit mixed in that sense. Like it's obviously not as interesting as some of the other titles, but it is still a really interesting mix, like a way to use those older titles that people miss and also just bring back that spirit of the Nintendo World Championships, which Nintendo was very smart to do that. I think they even brought back people that participated in the Nintendo World Championships back in the 90s and 80s, maybe. My memory is fuzzy there. You know, they really went and leveraged that spirit of competitiveness to try and make this game. And I think, you know, it worked out pretty well. I played that entire game. I ranked all the challenges, and it's a good game too. But you know, that is a lower tier game, but it still has its place. I would say, like if you're like someone who's into speedrunning, I think this is something that will probably appeal to you, and that's important too. Like Nintendo is appealing to various different demographics with this. Then we got another bit of a low note with we just mentioned 2 HD. I think most people would agree that that's not a remake that was really necessary, and if it was, it really deserved a lot better than what it got. It was a very straightforward port from the 3DS, and they charged 60 bucks for it, which is more than what it cost on the 3DS when it was brand new. So yeah, that one was a bit of a bummer, but hey, we're counting the games that came out in 2024. And if you didn't play it on the 3DS, we just mentioned 2 is still a good game. It wasn't one of the games that like really stuck with me when I played on the 3DS. So if you haven't, it is a good game. Maybe wait for a sale. Don't pay 60 bucks for it, but you know, it is a good game. Then we have in August, I believe, Amio the Smiling Man Famicom Detective Club. And this one, you know, I've done multiple videos where I've talked about it. That's what it was. And it's my favorite game of 2024, and again, this is not a game that's going to appeal to everyone, but it is big for some big reasons. So this is a franchise, I think, as a Nintendo fan, there's just an inherent excitement to know that this franchise started over 30 years ago on the Famicom in Japan. At that time, it never came out anywhere else outside of Japan. And then in 2021, we got remakes of those games on the Switch, and those were released everywhere, only digitally. But those remakes were successful enough that someone at Nintendo wanted to go back and just make an entirely new game in that universe that again released everywhere and this time got a physical release everywhere. So that alone, if for someone who's into Nintendo and Nintendo history, that is already a big enough reason to find this like a very, very exciting game and something that's really just so special to have at this point in the Switch's life. But also the fact that this is an excellent visual novel. Like, I'm not a visual novel guy, and I just absolutely love this game. It is my favorite game of this year. Like, the story just gripped me so well. And it gets so emotional towards the end. So it's so sad. So yeah, that's amazing game. The background to this game is also just such a big part of why it's special. And yeah, this one was fantastic, and it's such a momentous occasion to see it release. And then September we got The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom, another game that is in my top 5 games for this year that I made that video previously. And yeah, Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. So first of all, it's a Zelda game, so that already makes it a pretty major release to have in like the last year of your system, especially when we already had Tears of the Kingdom just last year, and that was a huge experience too. So yeah, major release just for that. But then you take the fact that this is the first Zelda game where Zelda herself is the hero. She is the main character, and she has a completely different ability set compared to Link, but it still feels like a Zelda game. It's very inventive in the way that it plays because it does have to work with different mechanics to make Zelda different from Link. And it's just such a fun game, the way that it changes up traversal and just how you approach enemies in this top-down Zelda game, because you had this freedom that was introduced in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and that was only for the big 3D games. But this brings a lot of that freedom in a more sort of structured, slightly more limited format of the top-down Zelda games, but it's still very freeing, and it really allows you to experiment in so many ways. A lot of them I didn't even try myself, but I've seen some crazy things with people traveling on the flying tiles and stuff, like crazy stuff you can do in that game. And yeah, it's an awesome game. It's a new Zelda game. It's the first Zelda game starring Zelda herself. Again, female protagonists are not something Nintendo does a lot of, but now we had 2 games in this year that do have a female protagonist, and that's a very big deal, and it's really nice to see. Then October, we had Super Mario Party Jamboree. I'm not really a Mario Party guy, but I think anyone can tell that like this is the biggest Mario Party Nintendo has ever made. There is over 100 mini games, a ton of game modes, ton of game boards. They're finally making game boards that are good. So, from my understanding, the past few brand new Super Mario Party games had very, very bad board designs for the most part. So the new ones are very inventive and original, and they actually look pretty fun even for someone who's not really into Mario Party. So one of the best Mario Party games ever, just releasing on the last year of the Switch. I think you have to admit that's a pretty big deal as well. And then we have another momentous occasion, but also one that's kind of a niche focus, which is Mario & Luigi Brothership. I did an actual full review of this one, and this is a fantastic game too. It is a little slow to get to the interesting parts. It takes a little bit long to get through, but it is so charming from a visual perspective, and the story and the characters. Like, it's a beautiful game. The characters are really, I find them really endearing, even before like the stakes really rise and it's very intense. Even before that, I think the characters are really endearing in that game. So yeah, it's a really great game, but what makes that even more special is that we had this lull for 8 years almost of Mario RPGs. Like the last one we had gotten was a remake in 2019, I think, of Mario & Luigi Bowser's Inside Story, and that remake did so poorly that it basically shut down the developers, Alpha Dream. So we are 5 years without anything from the Mario and Luigi series. Even longer if you exclude remakes. Like RPGs in general have been really quiet for Mario. And then, last year we got Super Mario RPG remake. And then in May we got Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door remake. And now we got a brand new Mario and Luigi with a brand new development team at Acquire, which has a lot of members from Alpha Dream that moved over. And the game is just great. It's a great game. It may not be the best in the series according to fans, but it's a great game. And it's just a revival of another series that people were really worried would be dead at this point. And it's a great revival at that. It's not perfect, but it's great. So at this point, we have this big library of titles that has a lot of appeal with specific groups of the fan base of Nintendo. Another code, it's a big niche. It's a small niche, but it's an important niche, a very passionate niche of Nintendo fans. Mario vs. Donkey Kong is a remake of a game that from an era of Mario vs. Donkey Kong that people actually miss because the subsequent games weren't as good. Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door is another remake of a game that people have really missed for a long time. And then you have Princess Peach Showtime, which is a brand new game with a female lead with a very new concept for Nintendo. Zelda Echoes of Wisdom is a brand new Zelda game with Zelda as the lead, brand new mechanics, and a lot more freedom than any top-down Zelda game had provided. Emu the Smiling Man is a revival of a franchise that seemed like it would never have gone anywhere after 30 years, and now it's back with all this, it's such a great game. It's just so good. And then Mario and Luigi as well. So there's so much that caters to specific parts of the Nintendo fandom here, and it's just a really good lineup. And of course, in December, the last game we released was Fitness Boxing 3, I think. So that's I don't even know if that releases at retail, but that's the 12th game that I forgot to mention. But we have a library here of games that do very specific and very important things for the fandom. This all works in a way that it'll keep Nintendo fans engaged and interested in the lineup. It keeps fans very eager for what's coming next. And that's really the point here. A lot of the games that Nintendo released in the later years of other platforms, now of course if you include the 3DS and DS, Pokemon was there, so that's another thing. Like Pokemon always has a big role. But if you look at everything else, like the games that released in that last year before the next system comes out, they're not usually that appealing. Yeah, some of them do have niche fan bases, and a lot of them probably developed niche fan bases since that release, but they didn't have that same power that they do today. So for example, at the end of the DS's life, you had Golden Sun Dark Dawn, which is talked about very fondly today, but I think back then people didn't care as much about something like that. And then you had games that people just legitimately don't care about, like Fast Fighters. And there's one of the Mario vs. Donkey Kong games also released on the DS in 2010. And it's like, at the time, people were really getting really tired of that franchise. So it's different looking at the DS lineup and the Switch lineup, for example. And you see a lot more games on the Switch that may not be major mainstream tentpole releases, but they do just the perfect job of keeping Nintendo fans talking about Nintendo and keeping them excited for what's next. So now we're heading into 2025. The Switch 2 will be released the first half of the year, maybe. And even heading into that year, we already know 2025 is gonna have a few more or less major releases. You got Donkey Kong Country Returns HD in January. That one, it's a second remake of this game, but it is nice to see it in HD, and it's definitely gonna be the definitive version of the game. because the first remake, it came from the Wii to the 3DS. It had better controls but way worse graphics. So this one is gonna like kind of bring the best of both worlds there, and that's awesome to see. And then of course we have Xenoblade Chronicles X, which is the last Xenoblade Chronicles game that wasn't on the Switch yet in any capacity. So it's finally coming. It's another, Switch game that's finally, no, it's not Switch game, another Wii U game that's finally coming back to the Switch. And so you don't have to get a Wii U anymore, because you shouldn't. Let's be real here. So, you have those, and then you have Pokemon Legends EA coming in 2025. Metroid Prime 4 is also coming in 2025. So there's a lot of excitement still surrounding the Switch, heading into the Switch 2's life, into the Switch 2's launch. And that's a really big deal for Nintendo, because that's how you ensure that your next system does well at launch. When people stop talking about you, and if you have this big wait period where nothing is really happening before the next system comes out, people are just gonna stop at some point. That hype cycle without anything coming out, there's only so long you can do that before people just stop caring. And Nintendo throughout 2024 has done this really, really great job of steadily publishing games that people have been really wanting, in some capacity. And that's gonna keep people talking about them as we head into 2025 and the Switch 2's reveal. So, and launch, of course. So I think maybe it's not 100% perfect, but it is as close to perfect as I think you can really ask for a console transition for Nintendo. Like, the amount of games they publish and the system, the impact, like the impact of those releases in 2024, I think, is much higher than anything we've seen from Nintendo in the past. So yeah, it's really exciting to see that Nintendo is nailing this, and now it's really just up to how Nintendo handles the actual Switch 2 announcement and launch. Because I feel like they've played all their cards right so far. They have everything they need to launch the Switch 2 to a massive success. That's the only detail they need to get now, is the actual announcement and launch of the Switch 2. So here's hoping that goes well as well. That's kind of a rant there, but I just kind of wanted to talk about Nintendo's 2024 and how I think the Switch 2 is benefiting from it, especially with backwards compatibility being a thing. So yeah, I'm looking forward to 2025. This is the last video of 2024, so Happy New Year, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you in 2025. Bye.